your face. Yeah. And make sure we're all our mentors and grants document it and keeping the data for the grant contract we received from Lake Oakland, Great Plains Travel Chairman. She's making sure that we're all in good shape and he does helps out with the Tuesday and Thursday 4-hour sessions that we provide for the participants coming for out there. That's keeps us good. And then she also on Saturday morning, sometimes all day on Sunday, she provides building alcohol assessments here for the center. I think she can do 4 to 6 assessments one day. She did them on Saturday, so that's good. Then we refer from there we refer to the 5 Great Plains Travel Treatment residential programs, also to 2 long-term treatment programs in Phoenix, Arizona. Then as on our return, we do the continuum of care here as long as it's needed. So then I appreciate you, Mankashi, Ruth, Cedar Face. She's coming, I'm not sure where she's at, but she's coming on Zoom today. Thank you, Mankashi.
All right, good morning, Hihani Washte. I am coming from Porcupine, South Dakota. I decided before the conference to not go because of the blizzard that was coming, and I'm glad I stayed home. We are still in a blizzard warning down here. I have drifts that are like up to my high windows past them. I think my son's got a snowblower and that's going to definitely be put to use once the snow stops falling. We're still in a no travel advisory on the reservation. And so I was really glad that I was able to do this, but not have to be battling the elements. Not having to battle the elements while being there. And I do miss being there with everybody. And so I looked forward to this whole program, but unfortunately I'm not able to be there. But I'm hoping that the connection is good and that it stays good all the time that we're here, that I'm presenting. I don't know that I would do a full hour, but you know, people that know me know I like to talk, so I'm pretty sure I could get it close to that as I can. My name is Ruth Cedarface. Like Shicheshi Jean said, I work with them. I help them with different areas. I've been doing that for about a year, maybe a little over a year. We've been doing different things together. My hope one day is that I become part of the team on a more permanent basis. Right now, I live in Porcupine, South Dakota with my sons and my partner. I always say I don't want to call him my boyfriend because like I'm too old for boyfriends. So I call him my partner. And we've been together for just over 9 years. I'm a relative to many and a helper. And I've been doing this work. I'm a licensed addictions counselor, and I've been doing this work for going on just over like 29 years. On March 1st, it'll be 30 years that I was actually working in this field. And I've been credentialed for 28 of those years through the different credentialing organizations through the Great Plains and through the state. Right now, my permanent job until the end of May is working with Little Moon School. We have a SAMHSA COVID response grant program called Connecting Roads, and we provide mental health and substance abuse work for the students at Little Moon School. We have seen an increase in substance use with our students when we came back to school, specifically cannabis, which makes sense because cannabis has been legalized on our reservation for adults. Our children fail to realize that it's legalized for the adults and not them. So we've been seeing a lot of cannabis related offenses in the school, and things like that. And like, and so it's work that I've really, that saying that you say, when you love what you're doing, you don't go to work. It's not a job. That's kind of like where I'm at with the work that I do. I've had the opportunity to work in different capacities with behavioral health, with the Indian Health Service, with Thunder Valley in the workforce development program, with Head Start, OLC's Head Start program. But everything that I do always goes back to addressing the substance use issues that we face among our people. And there's never a job that I've had where I didn't have to address the part with addictions and that type of stuff and the impact it has on our families. And so in all the years that I've been doing this, I finally decided in 2019 to start a private practice, because the work needs to be done and there's not a lot of people doing it. So I started a business called Mahbia Shinaki and We Services, and I'm a Native woman-owned business for profit at this point, and I'm hoping at some point it becomes more than that, and that I could employ more people. I have my Hunka brother who helps me with the work that we do, and so it's really been a really interesting trip for me in the past 29 years on doing this, and it's really an honor to be able to finally work with a program that focuses on the Lakota cultural component of this work, because no matter what we do, I truly believe that our healing comes from within, from our own people. And I always believe that our people have the answers with our own cultural ways to get this healing. And the good thing that I see that the benefits I got from working within Little Wound School was the trauma-informed school system that they had. And it taught me a lot, and it put words to things that I didn't have words for, and how we treat our people in the Western way. But it was always something that I believed in, that when we work with our own people, we have our ways of helping. And so we have our value system, we have the wodakuye, we have, the ceremonies, we have the things that we need to do to help our people. But a lot of times, because it's not something that's evidence-based, or that people don't have a lot of research in the Western way, that it's not recognized. But we have thousands of years of practice-based evidence in our own healing ceremonies. And I don't talk about this like with religion, because a lot of times people mistake our cultural spiritual ways with religion, and it's not. It's a way of life. And so a lot of times it's not something that a lot of people grow up with, but it's something that's innate, and we know it's there within us. When you see our babies, our children who may never have grown up with songs and drums, but when they hear it, they want to dance, and they want to do more. And so that's something that I think we have inside of us, is that this knowledge is in our blood. They talk about how we pass things on from generation to generation. That's what I believe. We pass on this knowledge and all these good things, not just the trauma. A lot of times we focus a lot on the trauma, but I always think that the resiliency that we have in our young people today, they show that resiliency that we carry in our blood, in our DNA. And so the work that I do tries to focus on those types of methods. I am trained to do other work. I use a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy in my work. I use motivational interviewing, relapse prevention type stuff. And it's Western trained theories of practice, but it's also something that our Native people have naturally. And you really look at some of the theorists, the psychological theorists, their teachings, their work comes from observing Native communities. And so I think the work that we do, it just comes naturally, because it's naturally part of the work that we do. And so that's kind of like my introduction and the reason why I do the work that I do, and why I'm so excited always to try to help Shicheshi Jean with Oaye Luta Okola Kichie to teach what I can and to help where I can, because I feel like the work that they do there with Ate Rick and Tui Ethylene and everybody that's involved, that it's something that we need, and that works. So before I go into like the reason why I guess the reason why I chose the title of my work is because anytime we do any of us that work with people, that work to help others, that are helpers, we I call us the 7 directions, the 7th direction, because a lot of the work we do, you know, we have our areas, life areas, we have the prayers, we pray to the creator, we pray, we respect Unchimaka, we have the 4 directions, but within all of that and all of creation, we ourselves are always at the center of all of that. And so we are that 7th direction that determines where all of this stuff comes, how all of this stuff plays out around us. And so when we are in that center of all of that and we're helping people, we have to try to maintain some type of balance, but sometimes life doesn't allow us to do that. Sometimes life doesn't like grief, and you're dealing with that and it hits you hard, and different, or you're dealing with people that are dealing with that, then it hits you in different ways. And when we're not taking care of ourselves and we're not handling it and we're not self-aware, then we start feeling, you know, these things here that we call burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is just cover this real briefly on what these are, because it's something that can happen without us really knowing. And so burnout is that physical and emotional erosion that someone can experience when they feel unsatisfied on a regular basis, and they feel powerless and overwhelmed at work. So burnout is something that I had experienced myself some years back as a young counselor, because I was doing 14-hour days. I was trying to, you know, in my own healing and recovery, I was trying to be a perfectionist, and I was trying to be, you know, that hero in the workplace. The family hero I played in my family system, I was trying to be that in a workplace. And so I ended up becoming burnt out, and I just lost all satisfaction in the work I was doing. I was frustrated. I was, you know, and I felt really powerless to make changes to the things. And a lot of stuff that came from wasn't the people that I worked with because I think the relatives that we work for and we try to help, they come to us with problems right out there on their sleeves. We know what's going on with them, but it's the coworkers that we work with that we don't know what's going on with them, because they're so used to hiding and pretending and thinking that everything's okay. And so those are the people that helped lead to the burnout, to my burnout, to try to be everything to them. So it was really a tough situation for me. And I remember leaving saying never and never, ever, ever will I go back to working in that field again. And I'm still here, you know, I'm still here. But I had to do a lot of work and a lot of healing in order to get past that and to get rid of the burnout, to come out of that burnout stage. Then you have the compassion fatigue, where you have the deep emotional exhaustion experienced after repeated exposures to traumatic situations or stories. It affects one's ability to feel empathy for their clients or their relatives, their coworkers or loved ones. And compassion fatigue, you know, that happens when you work with a lot of different things and issues that are difficult, that are hard, trauma, different types of traumas, sexual abuse, physical abuse, different things like that. And it's something that's so you don't realize that it's happening after a while. And I think a lot of times that's where people end up being, because it no longer becomes something that they want to do to help. It just becomes a job. Oh, I got to go to work. I have to do this. I just, and so it becomes something that's not, it's not the intentions they started with when they first started doing the work. And then there's the vicarious trauma. And that's where there's a profound shift in the worldview after being repeatedly exposed to the traumatic experience of others, of other people. You may not have ever had those experiences, but if you work with them and you hear those stories and listen to them all the time, then it starts having its impact on you. And you may develop like different symptoms similar to those of PTSD, where you might become hypervigilant, where you might become having nightmares or, things like that. And so those are things that can happen. And when we're not aware of ourselves and we're not aware of how we're doing or what's going on with us, then these things can hit us pretty hard. So I wanted to kind of really talk about, just like, briefly bring that up. When you talk about burnout, there's the signs and symptoms that we have of burnout. So if you're feeling exhausted and there's no physical reason that you're exhausted, you're pretty fairly healthy, then that might be a symptom of burnout. And then you have feeling disconnected. Either you're feeling disconnected to your coworkers, to the relatives you're helping, to your family members, to those people around you, to your job, to your purpose. You can get increased anxiety or depression. And then you have like a limited or you're unable to invest in reaching work goals. So you do the bare minimum. You only do like what you have to do. So to make it look like you're doing okay, you're just not invested in the work that you're doing. When we talk about compassion fatigue, then you start talking more about like chronic physical and emotional exhaustion. And you're tired, but you're also emotionally tired. You're drained physically, but emotionally as well. You don't have a lot to give, or you have nothing to give. You become irritable, you can't sleep, your weight changes. You either start gaining weight or you start losing weight. You start getting headaches, and you just feel real poor satisfaction in the work that you're doing. And so those are like the symptoms of what compassion fatigue can give you. And then when you talk about vicarious trauma, even though, like, if I was dealing with somebody who was in a domestically violent situation and I heard their stories all the time, even though I never experienced domestic violence, then I would start taking on their stuff. And then I would start developing the symptoms similar to PTSD, such as having intrusive memories. Even though it never happened to me, I would start developing those. Even though I've never been physically abused, I would start having those intrusive imageries. Then I would start dreaming about the situation. I would start dreaming, going to sleep and start dreaming about being in a domestically violent situation. And I would start avoiding situations or activities associated with the trauma. So I wouldn't want to be around. I would avoid work. I would avoid the people that I needed to work with, if that's, in order to avoid anything that had to do with those types of things that I started experiencing because of another person. So I thought those are like really important things to talk about, to really remember, because for me, the seventh direction, as that person in the center of everything, of the world, of my world, of this world, I don't want to sound like, that the center of my world as I experience it. And so the seventh direction, as that being, I need to understand. I need to look at that and say, okay, this is what is going on with me. And I had to learn how to do that as years went past, because I actually got to the point in my younger years of actually almost having a nervous breakdown. If it wasn't for a ceremony that I went to and not feeling well and being told, you know, this is why and this is what's going on, um, I would have probably went into a full nervous breakdown from being burned out from that work. And so I was really thankful for that. But it took me from that point to start learning more about how do I look at myself? How do I approach what I do? And how do I monitor myself? You know, and that was one of the biggest things that I had to learn how to do, because I don't know about you guys, but looking at myself sometimes is like some of the most difficult things for me to do. When I start being reactive to somebody or something, and I have to stop, I had to learn to stop and look at myself and say, why am I being reactive? Why am I doing that? Does it have something to do with some part of my life that's out of balance? Is there something going on that I need to address? And it's hard because sometimes it's much easier to do the blame game and blame people for doing, you know, for them causing me all these problems. But really, it's me. It's me, and I have to really take a look at that. One of the things about Natives working in the community, in their own communities, is there's so many cultural considerations you have to have when you're working in your community. So you need to know your people. You need to know what's the historical trauma of our people. I know there's a lot of people who don't like to say, well, historical trauma is nothing. It doesn't have anything to do with us now and all that stuff, but it does. And to know that if you're a helper working in a community with your people, you have to know that historical trauma, because you have to know what you're dealing with, because it's passed on from generation to generation. And again, like I say, I don't like to focus on that, because along with that historical trauma are the parts that are good that passed on, what kept us going, what kept us moving, what kept us, you know, being in this state of movement where we totally, completely evolved. What were those good things, and what was that resilience piece? Also, the other part of it is knowing the culture. Now people say, oh, culture, that's the Native American, that's the African American, that's the, you know, but culture also means, like, when you go work with your people in a community, one community may have different practices than another community. They may have different teachings, they may have different beliefs, they may have different ways of believing and, you know, doing things. But then breaking it down into even smaller areas is, you go into a family system within a community, they even have their own culture. They have their own ways of doing things. And it's, and you have to recognize that culture, no matter what it is. If they're a culture of substance using people, okay, that they use substances, they abuse substances. But what are some of the things that they do that hold that family together, because they still have strengths and they still have, despite the weaknesses of all of that, poverty and substance abuse and all of that. Well, what's the positive? What's the strengths that they have? And so you have to really be aware of your community and those things, as helpers working with them. And a lot of times it can cause clashes within communities, and you as a helper are in among those types of things that happen. Also, as a helper in your own community, you have to be able to understand and remember what your role is, and what community expectations of you are, and what personal expectations of you are. So when you go and you work with people, sometimes you might have to work with your own relatives. I know that happens, because I think I'm related to almost everybody on this reservation, but this is where I choose to do my work. And so I have to always keep track and keep that boundary in place of, yes, you're my relative, you may be my tui, you may be my my shijashi, you may be, you know, whatever you are to me, but I still have this responsibility to you to try to help you in the best way I can, without having those personal expectations override the good that I'm trying to do or the help that I'm trying to give. So I always have to make sure I keep my role. I also have to understand that when I'm working with the older, my teachings is when I work with the elder men, you know, how I conduct myself. When I work with the elder women, how do I conduct myself? And really make sure that those things are that they understand that that's in place for me. My value system is real important. And working with our younger relatives, teaching them that way and helping them to understand, you know, why I'm not just like that, you know, I'm like their auntie, but I'm also more than that for them if they need me to be. Because I could provide them that comfort, I could provide them that encouragement, but I could also do more and provide more if they need more than that. One of the things about working in a community is, and I think this is like really important because I always hear people say, well, I don't want to work with our Native people because they like to talk. They don't know how to keep confidentiality. But I think that's just, you know, a lot of times that's just a scare tactic. I mean, a fear tactic of not dealing with stuff. But I think a lot of times we know, like our professionals, and the more our young people are coming into this field and everything, I see the changes to so many different things. But understanding or knowing that when we work with our people and they give us that information, they tell us the things that go on with them. They tell us those hard things that they experience, that they're giving us the privilege of holding that information for them, of letting us know what's going on. And that is one of the most sacred things that we can have, a gift that we can have from our relatives, is that trust that they're giving us this information and what we do with it. And so I think that in the Western world, that's confidentiality. In our cultural ways, that's that empathy and that's that compassion and that's that respect that we have. So culturally, we have that already. We have that confidentiality piece already. It should just not word it like confidentiality. And so we have that already within our system. And so we have to really remember that, looking at that and working with our people. And I work with a lot of young people. And boy, I tell you, and since we came back to school, I've heard some pretty hard stories. I've heard some pretty difficult things that they've been going through because of the pandemic, and that pandemic created so much of this stuff that not saying that it wasn't there before, but it allowed for it to intensify and increase and, you know, provide such, I guess, just, you know, more terrible incidences of things happening. And so we talk about that information coming to us now, and what do we do? And I know everybody says, oh, we're going to face the pandemic, the effects of the pandemic for years to come. And I believe it, because our young people had to come through a lot of stuff during those 2 years without much help, because the helpers couldn't help the way they know they could. That we couldn't go and we couldn't say, come on, let's go, come to the NEP with us. Come on, let's just go sit and talk. Come on, I'm gonna take you over here, let's just cry. You know, that type of stuff. And so when you think about all of that, you think about how our cultural ways and our teachings and our value systems allow for us to be those people that we need to be for them. And then, like, really thinking about, like, when I look at loyalty and duty, you know, we have to really look at our people's expectations of us and how loyal we need to be. That's different than us, you know, and what is our duty to those people. Well, my duty is, if a child comes to me and says they were abused in some form, and they're my relatives, my duty is to try to get that child help in whatever way I can, and try to keep that, you know, that child safe, and get them safe and help them in whatever way I can. And the loyalty to my relatives that I'm dealing with that are a part of that abusive place, the duty to help that young person overrides all of that. And so really knowing myself and being aware of where I am in that space. And then of course the lateral violence that comes within any community. You know, a lot of times lateral violence comes in different forms. It's the name calling, the putting down, the passive aggressive behavior, you know, the different things like that. And that's part of that, but we have to always make sure we're aware of what that lateral violence is, because we can get caught up in that so easy. And I remember, and as a young counselor, I always tell my story. I'm not going to tell it today, but my story of I always say I grew up in my work, because I literally had to learn a lot about myself and the work that I was doing, because I had to learn how to take care of myself. And so a lot of times the lateral violence that I witnessed within the coworkers, and that was a part of the reason of the burnout too, that I experienced, or near burnout that I experienced, was that lateral violence, because there was a lot of lateral violence and jealousy about several different things among coworkers. And so out of that, as I got older, as I learned how to, you know, work past all of that, one of the things that I said was, in my growing up years in this field of addictions and behavioral health, mental health, I had teachers. There were the teachers that taught me so many amazing, beautiful, awesome teachings of the things that I could do to help people. And then there were those people that taught me some amazing, awesome ways of how not to be. Because that lateral violence took its toll, and it always does, no matter what. But as helpers, we have to be really careful of where we're at in that, and are we a part of that? And so sitting somewhere, and the sad thing about it is we have social media as a way to become laterally violent. We have social media as a way to abuse and put down and condemn and everything each other. And it's sad, because social media can be used for so many other good things and positive things, but and I guess it could be like that for anything that we do. So I wanted to really talk about these cultural considerations when working within your community, because those types of things are there. Those types of things are the things that we need to be aware of, and how our cultural teachings can be a part of, you know, keeping these in order and keeping these in line. So people that have the risk or vulnerability factors, on a professional level, people who specialize in care that introduces them to extreme issues and needs, addictions. I see everything. I see abuse, I see domestic violence, I see depression, I see anxiety, I see, you know, all this stuff, extreme issues and needs of safety and needs of things that there's nowhere here to get it. On our reservation, there's really nowhere. We talk about, me and other counselors at the school talk about having a safe house, because our children need to be safe, but there's nowhere here for that. We also have professionals who provide service to someone considered dangerous, working with criminals, working with people who are considered dangerous, I worked in a jail. I worked with people who were considered extremely dangerous, who were facing life terms for extremely violent crimes. And so that was a risk factor. Those are risk factors for me. Working exclusively with those who suffer from depression and or child abuse. So you look at CPS, you look at DSS, you look at those people that handle that, and their risk factors for developing burnout, compassion, fatigue, or vicarious trauma are really high. And those specializing in death, grief, and bereavement. And that's probably all service providers on the reservation anywhere because there's such a high, and especially because of the pandemic, especially high rates of death and death for people who shouldn't have died. But that also goes with the losses that are not death related, such as losses of homes and jobs and lifeways kind of stuff. Then on a personal level, for those of us who have personal and collective trauma history, who have experienced trauma personally in their lives due to substance use in the home, due to domestic violence, but also collective trauma within the community of all of those things. And then if you have a high stress personal life, boy, whenever I seen that, I was like, you know, that was something I had to learn how to de-stress, and I still learn. I'm not perfect at de-stressing my life at all. So I know when I'm high stressed because I have the symptoms and all of the stuff that comes with it. But if your life is high stress and you're doing the work and you're working among your people, your risk and vulnerability factors are high. And if a person considers themselves highly empathic and sensitive to individuals, then your risk factors are high too, because if you're empathic and a sensitive individual, that means you can sense a person's emotions, and if you're not careful, they stay with you. You can absorb them and stay with you. And then the people working with suicide, who work with are people who are suicidal, have suicidal ideations, who work with just suicidality issues. And so the factors of those are really high. And I'm sure there's other areas that put you at high risk and make you vulnerable to achieving or to getting burnout, compassion fatigue, or experiencing vicarious trauma. So I look at this, and I think, you know, when I look at this, our life areas, so the Changleshka, it represents our 4 life areas. And some people add in a little bit of the social with the emotional, and there's different areas you could add in there. I keep mine real basic, real simple. And I put a star in the center as the representative of the 7th direction. Because when you're self-aware, you have to really take a look at all these different areas of your life, especially when you start being reactive to something. So when you look at your nuhi, or your spiritual self, how do you take care of your spirit or your inner child? Because I look at the inner child in addictions counseling, the inner child representative, that's the spirit. And how do you take care of that person, that inner child? And I had to learn how to take care of my inner child. I had to learn how to take care of her and nurture her and love her and appreciate her, because if you look at the inner child, they're representative of the child within you, and we all need to keep that. We all should always take care of her or him, because if you look at a child, they're so full of wonder, they're so full of excitement, they're so full of love. And as we get older, we start losing that. And the more we get into working with people, that starts getting dulled out. And pretty soon we're those crabby old people that we don't need to be, because we can keep in contact with that inner child. Then you look at your physical, your tachan, and what do you notice when you are starting to feel overwhelmed, when you feel stressed out, when you feel like things are getting hard? What physical symptoms do you notice? I always look at that and I think, okay, whenever I start feeling stressed out or overwhelmed about something, what is it? I start clenching my teeth and my jaws, and I sleep. I clench my jaws, and then I start getting headaches and jaw aches. I wake up with headaches. I have crazy, you know, like I tried one of those things one time that you put inside your, like a mouthpiece, and it didn't even really do anything, because I still woke up with the jaw ache and the headache. So what is your body telling you? Your physical self. My body, I feel tired. I feel agitated. My heart's racing. So when I'm feeling overwhelmed, there's different things I really watch for because I learned how, and I had to learn how to do that. Mentally, what thoughts come up when you're under stress or overwhelmed? Like, I can't do this. I don't like doing this. I know for me, I start having crazy old dreams. Like one time I was really trying to, we were getting ready for a review for our files. And I remember being so stressed out about it, but I was like that perfectionist young woman that was going to get it all done and we were going to get like excellent scores if it killed me. And I remember one night going to sleep and we were like a few days away from the review. And I had a dream of files chasing me and hitting me. And I was thinking, that's crazy. I mean, it was crazy, but as I got older and better in my self-care, I was thinking that was a signal. That was my mental health, mental self telling me, you're too stressed out. You know, this is affecting you too much. This isn't a good thing for you. So I learned that. So now if I have dreams about work, I know that something's stressing me. So I have to get to the root of that and look at it and see what's going on. But also the mental, the thoughts, you know, that I don't like doing this, I quit, I don't want to do this anymore, this is too much. So it becomes like a real negative deal. And then you look at how are you feeling emotionally when you aren't in a healthy place. Why do you do the work? You know, so a lot of times, and for me, when I was in those burnout stages or those high stress stages, I would think, geez, I need to do something else. Why do I keep doing this work? Why, you know, so that emotional, you get irritable, you get angry, resentful, you know, and so looking at that area is like, well, what's causing me to do that? So I could sit here and if I was in a bad place, I could start posting stuff about people on Facebook or situations, being real passive aggressive, being angry, but not really addressing what it is that pisses me off or upsets me or whatever. And so the work of looking at that, of being in the center of yourself is what you have to really be able to try to work on. And I always say, and I ask people, and especially the young people who want to start in this field, is why do you want to do this work? Why? A lot of times we get into the field of helping people because we were hurt at one time, or we have gone through something at one time, and we want to help people who may be going through that now. So my question to them then would be, have you addressed your hurts and your traumas before you help others? Because in counseling, we say we go by the codes of ethics. And one of the codes of ethics is do no harm. But when we try to help people and we haven't helped ourselves, then you can do harm, and a lot of harm. You can create dangerous situations for a person. And one of the things that I was always taught by my mentors was you can only take a person as far as you've gone. And so I always want to make sure that I'm able to carry them at least to a certain point that I know I'm comfortable with before I have to switch them off to somebody else that can help them in a better way. So one of the things I go back to is whenever I was working and dealing with grief, and I've dealt with grief and I've experienced grief, but I've never really experienced grief where I had to work myself through the whole thing and get past the stages, because them stages are crazy. I used to tell people, oh, you're going to be in denial and then you're going to be blah, blah. Then it doesn't happen that way. But I had to learn how to do that. So I think back to the people I worked with back then, and I say a prayer and I apologize to their spirits for, you know, not knowing anything. But when I had to really work through that and I had to experience it, then I was able to say, oh, okay. So I could have created harm. I could have done harm. And so I wasn't able to really help them, I don't think, but only up to the textbook knowledge that I had. But now I can help people. I feel like I have a better understanding of it, where I can at least get them to the point where I can say, okay, well, if, you know, maybe we need to get you to somebody else, because that's about doing no harm. And dealing with our traumas, we have to be able to recognize them, because if we don't, we set ourselves up again as helpers for hurting ourselves and other people. And so this whole Changleshka piece here is one of the things that I, you know, use as a tool, because it's a tool for me to remind myself, how do I look at what's going on, to be self-aware, to become that better relative, that better helper, that better, you know, to build that seventh direction up, to become a better, healthier person for the people that come to me. Because to me, that's important. I think, how if I was to send if I was to send my family to somebody, if how would I want them to be treated? How would I want them to get help? And I always relate that back, because you always want the best for the people you love. So I always apply that to the people that come to me, and I want to be the best person to help them. And so I use this as a tool to constantly look at that. So why is self-awareness important? To me, self-awareness is important because many of those we help are hypersensitive and hypervigilant because of the things that they've gone through. And they know, and our young people working with them, they know when we're not aware, we're not paying attention, they know what's going on. And they're hypersensitive to emotions, and they're hypervigilant and watching out for all this, the signs of somebody that doesn't care, that doesn't pay attention, and all of that. So we have to make sure that we're self-aware. So when somebody comes to us, am I fully here? Am I grounded? Am I regulated? Because when I work with young people, I have to be regulated if they're not. And I have to teach them to regulate when they can't. And so I have to make sure that I'm regulated when they come to me for help. And I had a young man come to me this past Monday before the blizzard is at work and stuff. And he was looking for one of my coworkers, and he was like, I need to talk to so-and-so. And I was like, well, they're not here. I'm here though, if you want to talk, you know. And so he sat down and he told me some really sad stuff. And really like things that, and he wanted assurance, and he wanted, you know, he wanted to know, you know. And so I sat with him, and we sat and we talked, and we, you know, and sometimes it's just that, being just present in the moment with them and regulated enough to be able to help them through something that they might need. It might not be the answer, but it's at the moment, that time, and he's going to come back. He's going to come back, and they know our doors open, and anytime they need to, they have our numbers, that type of stuff. So those kinds of things are important. We also have to remember that many of our people that we work with are operating out of their trauma brain. So their only focus is the immediate need, what's happening now, what's going on now. Their trauma brain doesn't let them sit and listen to something like this. It doesn't let them sit still. It doesn't let them do anything, because their trauma brain is operating for survival. And they deal with a lot of emotional pain. They deal with a lot of mental and physical pain. And so when we can be that person they come to, we need to be that person that's safe. And that self-awareness piece is so important, because we want them to be able to feel safe and able to address whatever it is they need to address. And I guess in that simple saying is, they know we're not, they come to us for help, and they know if we're not okay, because they're so used to dealing with that high level of emotional junk that goes on in their lives on a daily. And they know when we're not responding out of compassion, when we're not responding out of empathy, you know, even like in our groups and the processes we have, they know. And we've been able to do some really, I feel like we've been able to do some really good work because we work in our office, we work together, and we we regulate, we meditate, we breathe, and we talk about the things that's going on with each other to kind of get feedback and to help each other out with that. And so it's really important we make sure that we're constantly aware of where we're at in the daytime. And when we're not, we acknowledge it to ourselves and to each other. Like, I had a bad night, I didn't sleep good, my arthritis is acting up, blah, 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 blah. You know, I'm in pain today. And so I'm gonna, you know, do what I'm gonna try to just, you know, whatever. So we communicate that to each other as co-workers so that when these young people come to us, we're okay. We're gonna be okay. So I think in talking about all this, to me, self-awareness and becoming that better seventh direction, that building that person ourselves up, is that working as a helper, you encounter so many things, some not so good for you. And it's usually stuff from the outside. But when it, and those are the things that we might not have control over, but when it's things that coming from the inside, those are the things that we have control over and we can work on. And if you don't take care of yourself, you can become really ineffective. When you're able to care for yourself, you're able to help others. You don't have a block. It don't stop you. And you will do it in a good, healthy way where you will not cause harm. And part of the self-awareness is being able to know your limits. What are your limits? Who can you help? What can you work with? How far have you gone in your own healing? Taking time out to take care of those areas you need to, so you can be the best helper you can be. And I really think, you know, the young people that are starting this field to really take a look at what is their why. Why do they want to do these things? Why are they working in this field? Why are they gravitated towards that field? Because I think a lot of us know that there's so many reasons why we do the work we do. And I had to look at my why at one time, and I looked at it and I said, okay, so why has this become my career choice at one point? I was an accidental career choice. And then it became something that I enjoyed. And then it's just something that, you know, I continue after after 29 years of still enjoying the work that I do, because it's not a job that gives me a pat on the back all the time. It's not a job where you see a lot of success, especially now today with like the fentanyl and the methamphetamine and all of that stuff. But my why was because at one point in my life, I did not know where to go to learn about this stuff. And I wanted to become that person that could help somebody that came to me that may have needed that help. And so I carry that on with me on a consistent basis. That's my why. I just want to help people. But it took 29 years, and it's going to take probably, hopefully 29 more years of healing, because that never stops. We're never going to be perfect. And there's going to be things that we have to work on. But I hope and I pray that that's something that I continue to do, is that healing piece within myself, so that I could get to be that elder lady, that elder woman who one day has infinite wisdom and knowledge to share. I don't feel like I'm there yet. Even though I'm 55 years old, I'm still at that really young elder stage. And but my goal is to become that good relative when I'm an elder lady that somebody needs to come to help. Even if I'm not doing the work I'm doing today, that I still can be that person for them. So with that, I want to thank you for your time. I want to encourage you all to have a good day at the training. be careful out there. I know the weather's still doing its thing, and I'm glad for it because that means Unchimaka is getting the rain or the moisture she needs because we've been so dry. And I just want everybody to stay safe. And I say Wopila to all of you for attending the conference, to Wopila to Shicheshi, Jean, and all the staff for all the work they've been doing. And for all the other presenters for making the time and being there.
Opila.
Do you have any questions for Ruth? All right, no questions. Let her know that everybody appreciate your presentation.
I thank you very much, Ruth. No
Yeah, you can
questions.
give her this big round of applause.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm.
All right, it's almost lunchtime.